Hello, Contemporaries, and welcome to the 2020 acquisition vote. Tyler can. And of course, yes, this is our pandemic edition. I hope everyone is doing well, safe and sound at home, and if you're involved in some essential service, thank you. We look forward to seeing you all in the same room sometime soon, and we miss you very much. Um, I'm going to be presenting some work, or a work by an artist named Giorno, born in 1936 in New York. Essentially lived his entire life in Brooklyn and well, other places in New York, and died last fall in 2019. Here's his New York Times obituary. John Giorno, who moved poetry beyond the printed page. Um, this is the work that I am presenting for acquisition. You can't hurt me because storms can't hurt the sky. It seemed to me a really powerful kind of sentiment, a note of, strikes a note of resilience, that even in the midst of the storms that roll into all of our lives, there is a part of us that is larger, as large as the sky, and that that can't be touched. Something I don't know. I think the human spirit is really the me there, and I felt like this would strike a kind of a hopeful note at this particular moment. We are also featuring the Art After Stonewall exhibition. You can see the sort of rainbow spectrum that is the background of this painting. Um, as I'll maybe talk about in a little bit, Giorno himself is kind of a queer elder, and was really very involved in not just the world of visual art, but the world of poetry in New York from the late late 1950s up to 2019. The piece is 56 by 56 inches square, so quite large, shy of 5 feet. And its price is $40,000 with a $5,000 discount. Prices are actually sort of going up from $45,000, so we settled on a 12% discount. Even if John Giorno had never made poetry or painting, he would have a sort of footnote in art history as the subject of Andy Warhol's film Sleep, which shows 5.5 hours or 5 hours and 20 minutes of John Giorno sleeping. The two met in 1962 at Warhol's first exhibition of pop art at the Stable Gallery, and then over the next 2 years they became quite close. They were lovers, and I think Warhol's own work on kind of pop aesthetic really influences Giorno in the same way that Warhol would go out and find an image like a Campbell's soup can or a Brillo box and bring it into the realm of painting. In this very year, 1964, John Giorno published a book called The American Book of the Dead, which was quite radical in that it consisted entirely of found poetry, texts from other sources, and that he would then bring into the realm of poetry. Just following that, actually Giorno created in 1965 this organization, a kind of label called Giorno Poetry Systems, which was dedicated to kind of connecting different facets of the poetry world, and became, well, following his relationship with Warhol, Giorno became involved with Robert Rauschenberg as well as Jasper Johns later on. And at this time, Rauschenberg, whose work obviously is in the Columbus Museum's collection, was producing something called Experiments in Art and Technology, where they matched up artists with Bell Labs engineers, and in Giorno's case, Robert Moog, who invented the Moog synthesizer. And so, in their collaboration, sort of what developed out of that for Giorno was a kind of aesthetic of an echo, a synthesized voice that followed Giorno's spoken word poetry. Um, his probably best known work is called Dial-a-Poem from 1969. And you can still access that work. Here is the number. You feel free to pause the video and dial 641-793-8122. And you will hear a little bit of Giorno's voice, and then it will select a poem for you at random. And it might be John Ashbery or Anna Waldman or John Cage or William Burroughs or Giorno himself. I think at this point there are 80 different poets involved in Dial-a-Poem. But its most famous incarnation was probably at the Museum of Modern Art in 1970, an exhibition called Information, curated by Canasta McShine, which is kind of this touchstone exhibition for artists who are moving beyond painting or one sort of medium and into these kind of conceptual arenas, and particularly with modern media. Actually at the information show, more than 1 million people dialed in, and it inspired a whole range of different dial such and such. But here's some of the places where that's been shown from 1968, through 2017. Giorno was actually also involved in a relationship, or really a friendship, with William S. Burroughs, a very, important writer of this period in New York. And actually, they lived together. Burroughs rented a room in Giorno's flat in the Bowery, which became known as the Bunker. Complete with a Wilhelm Reich orgone box. Let's see if I can point to that. Here you go. There's Burroughs there. That's the orgone box, and of course these are Burroughs's 3 typewriters, and that room has actually been preserved, almost like a sort of sanctuary from the moment that Burroughs left. And here he is in 1971 in India with Allen Ginsberg. Giorno traveled to India, I think a little bit earlier than this, and really became a disciple of Tibetan Buddhism, a kind of pretty early Western follower of the practice. And that remained with him throughout his entire life. And I think you can see that in that phrase, you can't hurt me because storms can't hurt the sky. That is, comes directly out of Buddhist philosophy. But here is the Tibetan Buddhist shrine in the bunker as well. And here are some of the audio recordings that Giorno released from 1998 back to 1975, and those are released on the radio. But in 1985, Giorno became involved in really sort of transferring his poetry into a kind of visual format for the AIDS treatment project, which he started in order to support people with AIDS. It's a small organization, but a kind of significant one in its connections to the art world in particular. And as you can see here, this is one of those works, which is essentially kind of an agitprop for compassion for people with AIDS. Treat a complete stranger as a lover, hug them as good friends, as they are, or as 10 years ago you might have had fabulous sex with absolute abandon with the same stranger. Now life is ravaged, and we offer love from the same root of boundless compassion. So that was very much a philosophy that Giorno carried into the AIDS treatment project. Here are just some pages from his CV, solo exhibitions. You can look at that at your leisure. But it includes, I haven't included the whole thing, but includes quite a number of different performances, books and films, um, and the like. So this, visual practice of really offering a kind of a single image, and something of an abstract one. Well, both sort of concrete and abstract is really something. I think that's a hallmark of Giorno's poetry paintings. Here is a series from 2007 called Welcoming the Flowers. Daffodils baptized in butter, which is just kind of a real evocative and powerful image. Here is Giorno with his husband, partner of 18 years, a Swiss artist named Ugo Rondini. And Rondini himself organized an exhibition at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris in 2015 called I Heart Giorno, which then actually spread out into New York in 2017 over 13 different venues, including the New Museum, Red Bull Art Center, the High Line, Kitchen, really quite a number of spaces, which kind of testifies to how well loved Giorno was in particularly in the New York art world, where he had such deep roots. Here's an installation shot from the Red Bull Art Center of audio and visual, it should say visual works from 1968 to 1995. And then following his passing, Art Forum, on actually it's 2020 cover of Art Forum in February, presented Giorno's one of the signature phrase, "Life is a killer," as a memorial to John Giorno himself. And there's a whole section of this issue that was devoted to Giorno and his work. The sense that of a kind of connection between life and death, and that there isn't one without the other, and that we should really savor life, as Giorno did in all its aspects, is something that I thought was quite prescient in terms of the situation that we find ourselves in now. This phrase, "you can't hurt me because storms can't hurt the sky," is also one that appears on a sculptural work. Here is the whole series of pieces, or a selection of pieces from the exhibition at Speroni Westwater, from which our work comes. Eating the sky, life is a killer, living in your eyes. Giorno's work is found in a number of different public collections, including the Pompidou Center, the Museum of Modern Art, the Musée National d'Art Moderne in Paris, the Paris Art Museum, and the Queensland Art Gallery. In terms of how it would connect with our permanent collection, we do have a couple of text pieces that are in our collection, including this Jenny Holzer Survival from 2000. It's a kind of scrolling LED that is at the top of the stairs in the atrium, as well as this piece in the garden, which too is very kind of significant and startling to read this, in the context of what's going on. It reads, "It can be startling to see someone's breath, let alone the breathing of a crowd. You usually don't believe that people extend that far." And as a kind of a queer elder, someone who was very out in the pre-Stonewall years, particularly with his 1967 pornographic poem, which was very much, about gay sex, um, our potential acquisition of this piece by Giorno connects with the Art After Stonewall exhibition and with the work by Tommy Lanigan Schmidt that we have acquired out of that show, along with others that I hope we will acquire. So again, you can't hurt me because storms can't hurt the sky.